This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about the rumored Steam console, a potential Switch 2 release window, some potential big reveals at the Game Awards, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 62. I am your host, the man who spent more time getting skewered by a spear than actually killing things in Dark Souls 3, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who became the very lingering will he fought so hard to destroy, Justin, better known as I Am Zeracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's been pretty good, pretty busy, I'd say. Took care of some errands and stuff on Saturday. Sunday, after I got home from church, I decided to, in light of stuff which we'll discuss later, I decided to go back to the Steam machine I bought and try tinkering around with it. Because the one I bought came with Windows installed, I decided to try to get that Steam machine original. Try to get that original feel for it. Unfortunately, Steam Machine or SteamOS 2.0 is no longer available anywhere. Even though if you go to Valve's website, and it's you type it in, and you say you want to download Steam OS, even though it says it's the Debian version, 2.0 version, what it really redirects you to is SteamOS 3.0, which I'm not certain how well that would. If that's really optimized, especially considering the fact that's for an AMD-based, device, whereas the original Steam machine used NVIDIA and Intel. So I wasn't going to really use that. So I tried using Nobara because Bazite and I think Chimera OS only work with AMD right now. So Nobara has a NVIDIA version. So I tried using that one. And getting it up and running is fine. Unfortunately, trying to boot it into the Steam Deck mode, unfortunately that doesn't seem to work too well. So what I tried to do was instead just go into Steam and enter big picture mode, and that works, but it seems to be really slow on that end. And I also decided just to try a couple games, or at least try one game. I tried to play, or at least start up Batman Arkham City, because I knew that's a game that should run relatively well on the device. Unfortunately, I don't know what the issue is, but it was only running at 1 frame per second. Ooh. And I had a hard time to get the game to close out because of that, and I'm not certain what the issue was. I'm going to try again later. I actually, I bought some RAM just because I thought, I don't know if it'll help or not. I know the original version only had 4 gigs of RAM. I'm not saying that's gonna help, but I bought 2 8 gig sticks, so take me to 16 and see if that does anything at all. I'm not really expecting it to do too much. I mean, hopefully it'll at least make the system run a little smoother, a little faster. But I'm hoping that the performance also is going to be a lot better on that end, but we'll see. But then also the other day, my job, at least in my department, in our department, we have a annual Christmas swap in the office. So I spent a good portion of the night baking once I was done with work. Quickly got food together, and then I was just baking nonstop at that point. And I originally was just going to make one type of cookies, but then I decided, I'm going to try something new and make that as well. That definitely took me a while to make, but overall, I'm satisfied. I mean, I brought the cookies there. I left without any cookies, so I mean, people took them, so I hope that's a good sign that people enjoyed them. I did actually get one of the managers, she actually sent me a message talking about one of the cookies I made, and she said, "Hey Justin, I just want to let you know that these cookies were great. Thank you very much." And so I'm like, "All right, at least I know someone like them." But yeah, that's pretty much a good summary of how my week was.
That's good. What kind of cookies did you make?
One cookie was a copycat kitchen sink cookies, which are what they have at Panera Bread, which is chocolate chip, caramel bits, and then pretzels with some sea salt sprinkled on top. And then the other ones were just brookies, so chocolate chip cookies with a brownie layer on top.
Nice. That both of those sound good. Very good. Good stuff. Let's see here. My week. Well, I know the podcast took me longer than usual to edit, mostly because it just took a lot to get through all of the. Primarily was chopping up my video clips to get them in there because of just the fact that I didn't have everything prepped before we recorded the podcast, so it took me a while to get through all that, and so I ended up being up a lot later that night than I wanted to be. But weekend was pretty standard, uneventful. Got some productive things done. I got all the recording done for Red Dead, which I forgot to include in my games that I played, but I'll just mention briefly that I did play those just for the sake of recording the stuff for the comparison, and got started working on the comparison. I think I'm only like maybe 8 or 9 minutes into the doing everything. It should be a relatively fast one compared to most of the comparisons I've been doing as of late, because for one, it's only 45 minutes long, and two, really the thing that took me the longest with the work that I did on it already was specifically because of the fact that I had to break up the recordings a bit. Like I did all the recordings in one afternoon. I just put the TV on in the front room for the kids. They got to watch their shows. They got longer time to do that, and did all my recording. But the thing was that there was one point where like I accidentally skipped a cutscene, so I had to go back and re-record that later so that I could insert that in. And so it just took me a while to get all the things lined up properly. And I had to like re-record a section because the lighting was really bad, and I mean, it was nowhere near as bad as like what I dealt with Persona, but it was still just enough to where it took me a while to get through. So I'll definitely be working on that this weekend and plan on having that up for Monday, God willing. But otherwise, not really much of anything going on. Yeah. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting. Oh, we had our church Christmas party tonight, but and I'm wearing my ugly Lord of the Rings sweater, the taters.
Well, I guess we both wear our ugly sweaters tonight.
Oh,
and actually,
sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead and tell me what you were going to say first.
Oh, well, I was just say, I actually picked this one because at my job, I've been nicknamed Thanos because I kept claiming assignments, and people said, "Oh, Justin's just gathering them all like Infinity Stones." So I said, you know what, I'm gonna find a Thanos Christmas sweater this year and wear it.
That's perfect. I'm gonna real quickly send you a link to this thing that I found. I found a Dark Souls Christmas sweater.
Oh my goodness.
It's perfect. Of course I sent it to my wife as a gift idea for Christmas, but I want to send it to you because I know you'll appreciate it. I'll send that to you now. So, but anyway, it's perfect. Like initially I was looking on Amazon to see if I could find anything. They didn't have anything, except for stuff that was like vague fantasy stuff. Nothing even close to being actually Dark Souls. But then I thought, I should just check on. Do a quick, search online and see if I could find anything, and found a couple of them. This is the one I liked better of the two that I saw, though they were pretty similar. So, but yeah, so that's it for me. What have you been playing this past week?
So, it's been very light this week, but pretty much, well, only thing I've been playing has been Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep Final Mix. I went ahead and decided, you know what, I might as well get that last game in the collection down, so I started playing that. I started Terra's story mode, and there were two things with the story so far that really caught my attention. The first thing was the fact that once you meet Yensid, or at least when Terra met Yensid, and I thought, I feel like Yensid could have prevented a whole lot of stuff from happening. Eric has said that he's been in constant communication with him, and Yensid said he suspected that Xehanort might be a bit suspicious, and he didn't tell Ericus about that at all. And Ericus had Xehanort invited to the Mark of Mastery exam, and, you know, I really feel like he could have just said something a whole lot sooner, and a lot of stuff could have been prevented way later in the games. But that's the first thing I mentioned. And the second thing I noticed, shortly actually after this fight that's going down in the clip, is that this seems very much like Star Wars Episode 3. I mean, it just feels like, wait, I feel like there's a whole lot of Anakin, Palpatine, oh, the council doesn't trust you, you should be a master. I'm just thinking to myself, I've seen this before.
Huh.
So that's very interesting. I mean, I feel like I'm very early into the game. I don't know how long it is. And that's actually something I will also add, is the fact that each world is a whole lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. I mean, granted, you probably do have to come back to the worlds later. I don't know yet so far, based on what I've been playing so far. It's very straightforward. And granted, I feel like that could be because of the fact that you play as 3 different characters. I guess they didn't want you to be... they didn't want to feel like things were dragging on for too long, so that's why they made each visit short. But it is pretty straightforward. Now, on the other hand, though, I'm playing on critical mode, and it's kicking my butt. I mean, for one quick thing I'll actually add sort of to that is, years ago, or like maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, I tried playing Birth by Sleep. I tried emulating it since I didn't have a PSP. And for some crazy reason, I decided to play it on critical mode. And I played it for, you know, a short time. And in the first world, I died within 10 minutes. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't sound right. And then when I played this version, you know, some odd numbers later, and I played again, and I reached the first boss, and it killed me. And I realized, now I remember. So, I mean, I just think that this critical mode of this game is a whole lot harder than any other critical mode. Granted, one in Chain of Memories didn't have critical mode. Proud was the hardest difficulty, but even Kingdom Hearts 2 didn't feel this intense.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm getting through it, and I'm also trying to sort of get reacquainted with command decks, because Recoded was the first game I played outside of Chain of Memories, which was the first game I played, but that one is so far off from every other Kingdom Hearts game that the game that, you know, technically, if you play a different game, you can say that's the first Kingdom Hearts game you played based on the gameplay. So Recoded was the first one I played, and, you know, that had command decks in it, so I became accustomed with that, and I liked that. And then, of course, later on, I played 1 and 2, and I had to learn that style. So coming back years later to the command deck system is a bit weird to me, just because it's so different from what I've become accustomed to, that I really have to get used to that. And I mean, I do feel like there's a whole lot of customization with the commands you can use, especially with your different skills, and how you can create new ones, and how you can, especially with your finishers as well. I do like that. It's just something that I really also have to get acquainted with. Now, one thing that I will say I'm not completely too fond of, and I don't know if that's because of me playing as Terra, is that while I do understand he is a strong but slow character, he does feel a bit too slow. I know some people that I've just happened to see in a couple places said that one gripe they have with the gameplay of Birth by Sleep is the fact that it's harder to do types of combos, just because you can't really just chain stuff together. Like if you do your normal attack and then try to use use one of your commands and then try to link that with another command, that it's difficult to do. if you can do it at all. And some people actually said they kind of prefer Recoded because it gave you more of that flexibility with being able to chain attacks together. So I would have to go back to Recoded and see how that is. But yeah, I think that so far it's Chain of Memories is decent. I'll just have to keep going further and see how I like things, especially if I play different characters. So I do feel like Ventus will be more like your Sora, Roxas type of character, and as opposed to playing as Terra. So I'll definitely see there. But yeah, pretty. I'm enjoying it so far.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, of course, it's been a long time since I played Birth by Sleep. It would have had to have been, I want to say it was probably 2011 because I remember that I was playing it heavily leading up to my sister's wedding. So I remember that specifically, playing that on the PSP. But yeah, so like I know that it had been a pretty good amount of time between when I had played. Probably, I think the last one I played before that was 358 over 2 days, and it felt a lot better than that. But of course, you just played Kingdom Hearts 2, so obviously you're comparing it more to that than anything else. But yeah, one thing that I noticed in this gameplay that I don't think I ever noticed when I originally played it is the guy you're facing in this clip is very clearly one of the same Organization 13 guys, or at least, the human version of the nobody that is in Organization 13 that you fought separately. But
yeah. When I saw him, I thought, hey, I know you, buddy.
Yeah.
Still as cocky as always.
That's his name. Okay. Yeah. I think that there might have been well, maybe not. I was thinking that there might be an equivalent of him in that little mobile game that I watched all the cutscenes for, but maybe not now that I think about it. But anyway, good stuff. I'm glad that you're playing Birth by Sleep, and definitely looking forward to hearing all your thoughts. I know I did not do a lot of the optional bosses in the original version because I know that there was like one particular that was really, really hard, and I was only playing on Proud mode because in order to get like the secret cutscenes, you only have to play. You can play either on Proud or Critical, and I just figured, I'll just go with the second hardest rather than doing Critical, since there wasn't any reason for me to do Critical other than Pride or whatever. And this is actually the first game I played on Critical, and since then, every time I've played a Kingdom Hearts game, I've done it on Critical. So, or not Critical, Proud. That's what I meant. Anyway, first game I played on Proud, and I've been playing on that difficulty since. So, okay. Now, as for the games that I've been playing, so obviously Dark Souls was a big part of what I played this week, but because of the fact that I don't want to break up my talk about Dark Souls like I did last week, mostly because from an editing standpoint, it's more of a pain to put together that way. I'm just going to talk first about the games that I played, or at least that I started in between sessions of Dark Souls during a frustrating point that I was having, which I'll get to. So one of the first of those is a first-person 3D Metroidvania that a friend of mine recommended to me called Supraland. That's S-U-P-R-A, Supraland. So this is an Unreal Engine game. I'm assuming it's Unreal Engine 4. You play as like, I guess you could say a stick figure of sorts, but I mean everything's 3D, and so your character's in basically in 3D, and it's like 3D exploration with Metroidvania. I mean, definitely a Metroidvania. It does not run on the Steam Deck. Now, granted, I did not try. I mean, when I tried booting it up, it was like the menu was like 2 frames per second. I couldn't even get in game. It's possible that because of the fact that it was by default going to the higher settings when I brought it up on my PC, that maybe it was doing that on the Steam Deck too, and I just needed to adjust the settings in order to get it running at low enough settings to run properly. But even if that was the case, I just decided that if I was going to have that much difficulty running it initially, it probably wasn't going to be worth bothering with on Steam Deck. So I had started playing this a bit Sunday afternoon after church, and I played for probably 3-4 hours. And actually, no, that's wrong. I started playing it a little bit on Sunday afternoon, and I don't know exactly how many hours I played initially, but I ended up playing it in the evening after the kids went to bed as well. So I don't know. Anyway, point is, regarding this game, I like it a lot in many ways, but the one thing I really do not like about this game, which is unfortunately one of the central aspects of the game, is that the platforming is very floaty, and to the point where it's like it's really hard to judge where you're going to land with a jump sometimes. And like, you, even when you get like a double and triple jump, it doesn't really add much of any verticality to your jumps. It basically just makes it so you can jump further, but it's like it's hard to judge the exact distance that you have to jump, and so it just makes it really tricky. That being said, this game, you have both a sword and after a little bit you get a gun, and these weapons, as you obtain upgrades, they become stronger. Combat is fairly simple, definitely a lot simpler than Dark Souls, and with that, it is just about anything is simpler than Dark Souls. I mean, it was a good change of pace, pretty much. I didn't play anymore after Sunday, but it was mostly just because there was like one of the puzzles that I was having a bit of trouble with, and not in terms of figuring it out necessarily, though it's possible I was doing something wrong, more just because how floaty the platforming was. It was difficult to get to where I needed to get quickly enough, because like if I was understanding how to do the puzzle correctly, and it's always possible that I was getting it wrong, you have to fire your gun from a specific spot and then jump down to a peg in the ground that you have to slam in order to drive into the ground, so that it will cause a platform thing to move up, but that platform is blocking the path for your fireball to get to a certain switch. But the problem is, because of how floaty the platforming is, it's hard to get the jump timing right, and I need to actually look it up and find out whether or not what I was doing that was the correct way to do it, because it's very possible that it wasn't the correct way. But it seems like that's what I'm supposed to do, and it just like, it was so floaty and annoying that I just haven't even come back to it. But what I also decided to start, because it's something that I've just been kind of thinking about trying for a while, and I was able to get the sequel really cheap on a Steam sale. Actually, I do want to mention real quick, Superland, the reason I got it was because it was like $5 on a Steam sale, and because, of course, a friend of mine had recommended it, and I trust his judgment. So anyway, but I've been enjoying it. But the other game that I've been playing, both in between my Dark Souls sessions and since finishing Dark Souls, which I'll get to in a little bit, is Psychonauts, the first Psychonauts game. So this one, in terms of gameplay, I think it's great. I really like it. It's just a classic PS2, Xbox era 3D platformer, with, collectibles and things like that. Just, about what you would expect for a platformer from that era. And I enjoy it quite a bit. Steam Deck, it runs 90 frames per second, and you get about 8 hours of battery life for that. So it's like double whammy of greatness from that standpoint. And I probably put, actually I can just look real quick and see what my Steam Deck says. I want to say it's probably about 7 hours into it, something like that. Let's see here. It says about 6 hours is what I have in it so far. But anyway, so this was like just a really nice breath of fresh air, because I don't play 3D platformers a lot, but I always enjoy them, especially when, there's collectibles and when the controls feel good and responsive and everything else. And so like I've enjoyed what I've been playing. However, there are a couple of issues with this game in terms of the PC version. The first issue is that by default, when you try to run it on Linux, it goes to the Linux version, which you would think would be good. But the problem is that with trying to do the Linux version, it doesn't recognize like any button prompts at all. It doesn't recognize your buttons on your Steam Deck. So the only way to get it to run properly, which isn't that big of a deal, but is to specifically have it run with Proton Experimental. And if you have it run with Proton Experimental, it'll run the Windows version instead. And from there, it works pretty nicely. However, the one issue that it still has is that it shows almost exclusively keyboard prompts instead of actual button prompts. Like it'll have a couple of the buttons that are displayed as actual Xbox controller buttons, but then the rest of them are all displayed as keyboard functions. And so it's a little bit annoying. I mean, it was simple enough to remap the controls, of course. And once I got that, then the controls have been largely smooth sailing. But the other annoyance that comes with that is that for some reason, it seems to like forget the ways that you've changed your buttons in between plays. And so when I started up, like I can't get into the menu. I basically just have to use the touchpad to use it like a mouse and then go to the controller settings menu and then re-enter things. So if anytime you close the game, when you start it back up, you'll have to redo that. And that's really annoying. So that it's just an irritation. Now, for the most part, since I like really started playing it more heavily, that hasn't been as much of an issue because I basically haven't been closing out the game. I typically just turn off the Steam Deck, put it in sleep mode, and then when I come back to it, I just continue where I left off. But like when I was getting clips, for example, from my recordings earlier today, then I had to do that. And anytime I've had to do that, it's an annoyance, and it's something that should not even be an issue. But the one thing I will be fair to them about is that this is an older game, or, in terms of PC games, it's kind of older, back from, the days when they weren't really making an effort to make the games controller friendly on PC. So there's that. But in general, I've really been enjoying the game, and I'm planning on sticking with it for the most part, even though I've definitely been like a little bit distracted with other games I've been interested in checking out. So at least right now, I'm still just playing this. I have no idea how long the game actually is, because it feels like almost like I would be near the end based on some of the story elements, but I can't imagine the game's actually that short. It seems like it's the end, that there's got to be a lot more to the story than that. So I don't know. I'm not even going to bother looking it up. I'm just going to play until it's done and keep it simple like that. But of course, Dark Souls 3. So when it comes to Dark Souls, of course, first thing I had to do was get the stuff I needed done in the Archdragon Peak before I rang the bell to summon the Nameless King. And so I spent some time doing that, including killing Havel and, getting his armor set and his weapon and everything, which unfortunately I don't have anywhere near the equipment to be able to effectively wear it and still have a weapon on me like I could in Dark Souls 1. But I think it's because there's more stats in Dark Souls 3 than there are in 1, or at least the stats are broken up differently, because I think Dark Souls 1 strength pretty much covered a lot when it came to the equipment load and, of course, being able to lift things, based on certain weights and all that. Granted, my strength was also at 60 in Dark Souls 1, and it's like 50 in Dark Souls 3. So I'm not showing any footage here, mostly just because it I just didn't really see the need, but also because, as I forgot to mention earlier this evening, I made the mistake of accidentally deleting a bunch of videos that I had. I mean, I wasn't planning on doing the footage for this anyway, so it's not a huge deal. It's more some of the other videos that I potentially lost, which I should be able to recover, but anyway, that's not really something we need to get too much into since we're not in that section anymore. But going back to Dark Souls 3. So, Nameless King. So I went into this fight initially, sword and shield in hand, using, of course, my Dragon Slayer armor shield because it has high lightning protection, and I knew that the Nameless King, especially while on top of the dragon, on top of the King of the Storm, he uses lightning attacks periodically, and so that protects against a lot of that damage. But I spent a handful of times fighting him, and I do want to note real quick with the footage here, although the footage is choppy, the gameplay itself was not at all choppy. It's just an OBS recording issue, so that's all there is to that. But it took me a while to get the patterns down well enough on the King of the Storm to where I actually felt like I could get through it consistently. But it was definitely something where once I figured out, what to block and how to move and when the best openings were for attacks on the King of the Storm, I actually got to a point where it was not too difficult for me to get through that first phase. So it basically the first phase going against the King of the Storm itself, I actually really just I didn't struggle with that a whole lot. Like, I definitely couldn't do it very well the first handful of times. I mean, I don't know exactly how many times I tried. Usually the times I would die, more often than not, would be either getting hit by the Nameless King on the King of the Storm's back, or if the King of the Storm happened to fly up into the air and then breathe fire down, because that since it wasn't really registering in my brain that I should run forward to get underneath him to avoid that, I'd get hit that and it would just be like pretty much an instant kill, guaranteed death whenever that happened. So thankfully he only used that a handful of times. Most of the times he didn't use that, and like the last time that he actually did use it against me, I knew to run forward, and so I was able to avoid it. But when it came to getting into the actual fight against the Nameless King, when I was at a point that I was consistently taking down the King of the Storm without any problems, not that I wasn't getting hit at all, just, that I was having a pretty easy time getting through the fight, knowing best times to attack and all that. Now, Nameless King, I did not honestly fight a ton of times on his own. I probably fought him, I want to say 6 or 7 times, and I don't think I ever made a whole lot of progress. Like, one of the last times that I attempted to fight him, I maybe got a third of his health bar down, if that, and the footage that I have here doesn't show that at all. But it got to a point where I was just not really sure whether or not I was ready to take the time to fight him on my own completely. And I figured, I might as well just look and see if there's anyone who's available for co-op. And I ended up going into a fight with 2 online summons. Well, actually, the first time I went in with like the one in-game default summon, and he was terrible. I mean, he died so fast in that first phase that I ended up just having to do the King of the Storm on my own. I was doing better without him than I was doing with him. But then I went in with 2 online summons helping me, and yeah, we took him down pretty easily. I feel like it definitely ended up Oh, I should note, as someone was trying to invade me right as I was about to walk through the fog gate, and thankfully, as soon as I walked through the fog gate, he left. But the two people that were helping me out, yeah, we took out both of them pretty easily. I can't even remember if I got the final blow on the Nameless King. It's hard for me to remember exactly what happened there, but I definitely robbed myself of the experience, not really giving it much of any tries on my own, because it's not even like I got super frustrated. I just decided I would see, okay, well, I might as well see about summoning some people because I just feel like trying. And I mean, I wasn't expecting to be able to summon two people. I figured, I'd summon one. They would just kind of help keep his attention off of me so that I could fight him on my own. So that I could take him down. And I mean, we definitely all, worked together. But I mean, with there being three of us, he was distracted enough to where his attention wasn't just on me only. And so we were, able to take him out without too much difficulty. I definitely know that if I ever go through New Game Plus in the future, which I probably will someday, then I will definitely make sure I do this fight entirely on my own, because I firmly believe that it's totally possible to actually beat him by myself. It's just a matter of, actually taking the time to learn the patterns. Oh, okay, I did get the final blow. That's good. At least I got the final blow. I can say that much. But yeah, so that was that. Now, I did initially go into the, I can't remember the actual name of it. It's something, the Ariandel DLC. I can't remember the full name of it.
Oh, Ashes
of Ariandel. That's right. Okay, so I went into it, and I went into the Painted World, or, whatever it's called in this. And I played for maybe an hour or so. I basically didn't even finish getting through the first area. Like, I got over to the section where the wolves were, and those wolves were so annoying. Mostly because there's just so many of them. And it's like, I think, oh yeah, I got all the wolves, and then it would turn out, oh, there's more wolves. And then there's these creepy trees that start going after me, and like only some of them are actually come to life, and then the rest of them don't. And, once I realized that some of them do come to life, I started just throwing fireballs at any of them that I could, and doing whatever I could to take them out. But the thing is that like I think I'd gotten to a point where I basically cleared out all the enemies except for the big dire wolf, or, whatever it's called, the big wolf. And so I go to this, and by the time I get to him, I have no Estus flasks left. And my health is a little low as it is, but initially I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'll try moving forward, see if I can find a bonfire, just so that way I can save and then, go back and fight it. But it's like, nope, there's no bonfires even close by at all. And so I ended up, dying, and then I go back and spend a little more time trying to get through the area a bit. I mean, not very long. Like, I probably went through one more time, trying to just go back, pick up my souls, and then, mess with the direwolf thing again. And when I get there, I die pretty quickly. Wasn't able to retrieve my souls. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't know if I want to do this right now. I'm not sure if it's worth the effort. And especially because I was also just kind of feeling antsy. Like, I'm kind of ready to finish the game, especially because all I had left in terms of main game bosses was the Soul of Cinder. And so I just ended up abandoning the DLC. And I had talked to my buddy, who I've been talking to a lot about Dark Souls, since he's played all these games a bunch of times. And I mean, he had already told me that the DLC wasn't really worth it, because basically the only really good boss was the one that's at the end of the second DLC. But anyway, so I had asked him about the final boss. You know, is it like, how does that compare to the Nameless King? And he said, oh, it's easier, and it's a really cool boss fight. And I mean, I kind of had like a rough idea of essentially what the final boss was. That, you know, Soul of Cinders, like, presumably a combination of as many as 5 different chosen undeads who, you know, who linked the fire in the original game because of, you know, the variety of different attacks that he has at his disposal. And I mean, like, I thought, of course, that was, you know, really cool. Definitely a very cool concept behind it and all that, especially that tying back to Dark Souls 1, which I love. But I didn't really know exactly what to expect in terms of the difficulty other than what my friend had told me. So I go into this fight, and, you know, I go in by default. I have my Hovel shield because it's, you know, even though it's heavy, it's also one of the best shields in the game in terms of, you know, its ability to block damage and the amount of poise that it adds and everything. And going with Zweihander, obviously, go with like I'm, you know, not bothering with any pyromancy because I know that the boss does not, I mean, is strong against fire and is immune to poison and toxic. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to go in, you know, 15 Estus flasks and, you know, do everything I can against this guy. And hoo boy, I lost so many times. So many times. I cannot tell you how many times I did this fight. I want to say this is probably the fight that took me the most attempts of any fight I've done in Dark Souls. And I may be wrong on that. It's possible that Ornstein and Smough still wins that, especially if you consider, you know, fighting against them both in New Game and New Game Plus. But I tried a bunch of different strategies. Of course, obviously, like I said, I, you know, started with the Zweihander and the Hovel shield. I tried two-handed, tried all sorts of things. Like, I wasn't even making it through phase 1. Phase 1 was difficult. So one thing that I tried instead was I decided, okay, I'm going to go in lightweight and I'm going to use a bow and arrow. I'm just going to go in with a bow and arrow and see what I can do, you know, just keeping my distance and firing when I can. You know, it might be slow, but whatever, that's fine. And I actually did pretty decent. I think I got phase 1 down about halfway with that. But keep in mind, at this point, I thought that phase 2 was still on the same health bar. And so I just thought, oh, you know, if I can get through, I mean, you know, that because most of the bosses, that's how it is. You know, phase 2 is the same health bar. So then I also tried just some random weapons that I hadn't really used before. Like, there's a flaming spear thing that's from the gargoyles at the profaned capital. And like, I hadn't really used spears much at all, but I just thought, okay, I'll try it. Didn't really make much of any progress. I think each hit was doing maybe like 60 damage. 66 damage is what I was doing on average for a hit, which is nothing, especially because my dexterity wasn't super high. And so like, I couldn't attack very fast. It was pretty heavy. And it just like, even with doing you know, like a charged attack, I was only doing 80 damage. So it was just pathetic. So then I go in with the Fume Ultra Great Sword, which I, you know, also barely used. It's a lot stronger, you know, doing around 300 damage for a hit, 335 damage to be exact. And I know that because I'm watching the footage right now. But the problem is that it just, like, for one, I'm just not super familiar with the sword. I'm not used to using it. Furthermore, I didn't quite know the fight well enough to where I felt like I could handle it super well. I mean, at this point, I don't remember what like ring combination I had, but I was basically I was running the Fume Ultra Great Sword, had the grass crest shield, for the added stamina regeneration and things like that, just to help me along as best as I could. And the problem is that I just didn't know his attack patterns well enough, and so I was just dying. I didn't make much of any progress with that. So then I go in with Hovel's Dragon Tooth Hammer. I think I died watching the footage now, it was probably, he got 2 hits on me and I was dead. And got like 1 hit on him. So I went in full Hovel. I went in with the entire Hovel set minus the Dragon Tooth Club. And I could not run at all. I could only walk. And the first time I went in, my poise was so high that I could stand there and just whack on him. and I mean he was doing, I mean he was still doing a fair amount of damage. I was blocking where I could. I used like the ability in order to the shield's ability in order to like give myself a rock added rock texture to give myself some additional defense. And I got the first phase down about a third of the way. Maybe a little bit more. The footage is still going right now. Looks like it might even be as much as halfway down. And so I was thinking, okay, this might actually work. This might work okay. But I did not, of course, make it through that phase. Even though, I was surprised at how long I lasted, especially knowing, what his attacks were. So yeah, I got him about the first phase down about halfway. And every time after that I tried the full Hovel set, it just wasn't working for me. So I went back to low equipment load. I started using the reinforced club again because I had, used that successfully earlier in the game, and it kind of became one of my new favorites. And I had numerous failed attempts. Of course, I'm only showing a couple here. I ended up ultimately deciding that I wanted to go with partially a Fashion Souls build, but also, something that was kind of the best of both worlds in terms of equipment load versus, practicality for the fight. And so I go in, with like my Fallen Knight set and my, the Pyromancer, not Pyromancer, but the head wrap that just like wraps around your eyes and stuff, and just kind of like it looks kind of cool, and still with a club, two-handing that with the grass crest shield on my back, and still not having a whole lot of success. Like, I'm getting better at dodging his attacks more consistently. I can get him on his knees reasonably often, and get a couple hits in each time I do that. But still just enough times where I'd get hit to where it just wasn't working. So tried some other combinations, and tried putting on the Pyromancer, some of the Pyromancer gear because it's lighter weight than the Fallen Knight armor, and I'm once again doing pretty decently, but I'm still like not quite making it through, and it just ends up being the same situations over and over. The biggest issue of which is that stupid spear. I hate it when he goes to the spear. That was like the one that was always the hardest to avoid, because it'd be like, oh, I'm dodging out of the way. Nope, he skewered me. Oh, I'm dodging. Nope, he skewered me. And it was just so inconsistent being able to avoid those attacks. And like, I'd get to a point where I started to recognize the patterns well enough for like whenever he'd do the magic, the sorcery based build. It's like, okay, I can dodge almost all of these attacks very easily. I can usually get in lots of hits on him. And so whenever he'd switch to that, I'd be super excited because it was the easiest to avoid the attacks consistently and make some good progress. And like, I, even managed to get him down to like the very end of the first phase. And of course, at the time, once again, I didn't know that there was an actual second phase. I was thinking, oh, it's the second half of the health bar. I just have to get him down about halfway for the second phase, and then he's supposed to switch over to doing like the Gwyn sword and stuff. And so I'm, beating him up at the end there. I see his health bars down to basically a fraction. I'm just hitting him, thinking, oh yeah, this is the end. So I keep hitting, and then he drives the sword into the ground, and I die instantly. I finally made it to phase 2, and it wasn't good enough. And so it's just kind of like, all right, this keeps happening over and over and over. And I end up, trying some other weapons as well, which I don't even think it's gotten to that point yet in the footage here. In fact, it's possible I even accidentally left it out of the footage, but there's I end up trying the hammer thing that you get from the old Demon King. So like the big fire hammer, I managed to get that, and I try that out and try using its R2 attack and stuff. It's not really effective for me. I haven't upgraded it. I haven't used it. I'm not familiar with it. And so I'm just, having some issues here, and just time after time after time after time. And then, of course, probably the best run I had, I managed to get him down about a third or maybe almost halfway in the second phase with the club and everything. And then he takes me out with his big combo. So I decide, okay, I'm going back in. I'm going to grab Zweihander, and I'm going to just keep attempting this. I'm going to see what I can do with this. I think the footage here that's showing is actually some of the early footage, and I'll probably have to splice in the other footage if I still have it, which I might not. Although, actually, I probably still have it on my Steam Deck, even if I haven't transferred it. Anyway, I'll figure that out later. But I go in with Zweihander again, focusing on two-handed, with the Grass Crest shield and everything, and trying to, seeing if I can do any better now that I've gotten better at dodging his attacks and everything. And Zweihander is effective in terms of its damage output because it's doing around 400 damage per stab. And as long as I can dodge and get the stab in, then I can, do the damage pretty easily. The problem is, of course, that if I don't happen to get the stab in and it swings the sword instead, that takes longer. And so with it being a slower attack, it also leaves me open to attacks a lot more, which of course makes it even more difficult for me to get through the fight. And it just wasn't working. I don't think I even managed to get him to phase 2 with Zweihander at all. So I ultimately end up switching back. I go back to the club with the Fallen Knight set, or the main garment anyway, the special sorcerer head wrap thing, the Grass Crest shield on my back, two-handing this reinforced club, and I did it. It was last night. Before I started playing yesterday, I was just debating about whether or not I was even going to do that, because it's okay, I could try this some more, see if I can finally beat this, or I can work some more on editing my Red Dead comparison. And I opted instead to just, go ahead and play this because I knew his patterns well enough to where I knew it was possible for me to beat him. A lot of it really just had to do with me being able to properly dodge his attacks and dodge them consistently enough to where I could actually, still get in my hits and heal as needed, things of that nature. And I mean, it was definitely touch and go a bit there at times. There were a few times where it got close, but I learned how to dodge most of his attacks well enough to where I could do it more consistently than not. Not that I wasn't getting hit, because I definitely was still getting hit. But, you know, like, especially, obviously, like I mentioned, his magic phase is the easiest to dodge of all of them. His regular sword phase was, I could dodge probably at least half of the attacks, give or take. But, I mean, it was well enough to where I could do it pretty well. One thing I do want to mention real quick, because I forgot to mention it before, the one nice thing about Zweihander using that, when I was using that, is that it stuns him really fast. But of course, even though it stunned him really fast, I just could never get to phase 2 with it. So anyway, going back to my victory, I had figured out, okay, the curved sword, it was typically better to just try to stay away from him as much as possible when he was doing that, except sometimes like when he was about to empower himself, and then I could run up and whack him. And then I finally figured out with the spear, the best thing to do was to just run away. Just spend my whole time running away, running sideways as much as possible as well, because then he hit me a lot less often, and it was still difficult because sometimes like I'd get caught on the environment, or I'd actually accidentally run into the wall, things like that. And it, you know, more often than not, if I ran into a wall and got stuck there, even for a couple seconds too long, then he would get me with the spear, usually the charging attack. And eventually, just with enough perseverance, I was able to finally get through phase 1 again. And I do want to note, with phase 1, with phase 2, so I only got to phase 2 maybe 5 or 6 times total. I don't know. It may have been as low as 4 times. I know it was more than 3 times, but I didn't get to phase 2 a lot. Phase 1, I died so many times. I want to say it was probably 100 times. That may be an exaggeration, but at least that's certainly what it felt like. And probably a good half of those deaths were within the first like 20 seconds of the fight. So finally make it to phase 2. And this phase I find to be significantly easier, mostly because he only has one type of weapon. Well, I mean, technically 2 when you count the lightning bolts that he throws, but I knew enough about what to expect with that to where I could usually avoid the majority of his attacks. I did go into that second phase with only 4 Estus flasks, but it was something that I was still able to get through. I think I got to the last portion of the fight, and I didn't have any left by the time I got to the last portion, and I was just kind of like, okay, it's risky, but we'll see if I can do it, see if I can pull it off. And I managed to pull it off, and I just yelled because I was so excited. And of course it was at that time my wife was, it scared my wife because she was just, sitting reading while I was playing this. And, I scared her, but of course I was just so happy, so excited that I finally beat him. And it was like just a little bit before I needed to go to bed last night. So I was super happy, and I finally did it. I made sure that right after I beat him, before I did anything with linking the fire or anything like that, that I saved my game. I copied my save over to Windows, and there's no cloud saves for this, by the way. So I didn't have to worry about anything getting overwritten. Copied my save over to Windows, did one ending on Windows, and then went back to the Steam Deck and did the other ending that I was able to do. So I only have one ending left that I have to get, but I think actually theoretically, if I hadn't made the mistake of healing my hollowedness earlier in the game, just manually healing it, then I probably could have actually gotten all 3 endings without having to play the game multiple times. But not that it would have, mattered in terms of the achievements, since there's a bunch of them that are tied to doing New Game Plus and New Game Plus 2. But yeah, so I got the 2 endings, and that was basically it. And I have not touched the game since last night. I have no intention to go back into it anytime soon. when I do, I will probably just go ahead and try out the DLC on regular New Game. I'm not doing it in New Game Plus. No, thank you. And I'll grind through it, and I know I can get through it. It was just at that point, because the fact that I was so close to the end, I was just really determined to make sure that I did this final fight before I called it. I mean, and to be clear, when I finished out on Saturday night, I was very seriously at a point where I was just like, I think I'm just done with Dark Souls for a bit. Like I need to take at least a couple days off to just not even play it, because I was so irritated at what had happened. And I went ahead and, I mean, I did take Sunday off, and then Monday I jumped back in and tried a little bit, and then tried again a little bit on Tuesday and was able to finish it. So yeah, that's been my Dark Souls 3 adventure minus DLC.
Very good, very good. So I think I'll save Dark Souls 3 for last. So
why don't you talk about Dark Souls first, just to keep it all in the same conversation for the clips.
Cool. So I guess the biggest question I have for you actually is, so now that you've finished Dark Souls 3, what are your thoughts when it compared with Dark Souls 1?
All right, so I will say, first of all, I do love Dark Souls 3. I think it is an excellent game. It is definitely one where I could see myself playing it again in the future. However, okay, I guess I should back up some more. So I think Dark Souls 3 is like expertly designed in so many ways, and it really does have a lot of quality of life improvements over Dark Souls 1, to where I absolutely think, yes, this is something where I would, I would definitely always recommend it to people, just keeping in mind that it is a very difficult game. But something that I would also say is, as much as I like things like what I believe is improved dodging, the fact that you have separate Estus flasks specifically for restoring magic, which I think is huge over just having a limited number of spells that you have available to you. The poise I miss a lot, because the poise was just busted in Dark Souls 1, particularly with the Hovel set. It's just like, it was ridiculous how great the poise was on that thing. The fact that I could just stand there with Artorias attacking me and I could just wail away at him, and I barely flinched until it got to a certain point. I mean, realistically, I think it was at a point, basically, as long as I wasn't blocking him, I wasn't even flinching while I was attacking him. And the fight was still hard, but it was nowhere near as hard with that, at least not in the base New Game. And of course, similarly, wearing that set of armor in like the Manus fight, in New Game, I beat him on like what was literally my second try. And the first one was just like, I made like one dumb mistake and then I died. But then after that, I beat him really easily. Granted, New Game Plus, he made up for it by killing me a bunch of times. But I think the thing for me is that it's hard to explain exactly. Both games are so incredibly good. And between the two, like, I mean, obviously there are so many things that Dark Souls 3 does better than Dark Souls 1. But partially because of the fact that I started with Dark Souls 1 and I just really appreciated it, I like Dark Souls 1 better. But it's close, because it's like, it's so hard to say that, oh, I like this one better, because I think probably the main thing is that I don't think I had nearly as many like overly frustrating fights in Dark Souls 1 as I did in Dark Souls 3. Or at least I should say, when I played it on Steam, I didn't have as many frustrating fights. When I played it on Switch, I had a lot more, especially when it dealt with the Capra Demon, for example. which, I mean, I really only struggled with him when I played against him on Switch. On Steam, I think the first time I fought him, actually, I think I just decided from the beginning that I was just going to throw poop at him because I hated his guts so much that I didn't care about cheesing him. But then I think that was the only fight I really actually cheesed in that game. If I remember correctly, because I'm pretty sure that every other fight I did, even if I used an easier method, like a relatively cheap method, I most of them I wouldn't really say I cheesed. This one I cheesed more fights, and I know that part of that was, most of that was really just my own fault. But I felt like I got to a point where I got frustrated more so and felt like cheesing was the only way I was going to get through the fight. And really, I think the only one where I definitely would say I don't feel bad about cheesing them was the dancer. And to a lesser extent, the twins. The twins, like, I definitely, like, wish I had been able to get through the fight 100% legit, but I don't feel as bad because I did try a bunch of times. I think the main thing is I need to get to a point the next time I fight them, whether it's in New Game Plus or something else, I need to get to a point where I can consistently get through phase 1 normally. Because if I can get through phase 1 consistently, then I'm much more willing to try phase 2. It was just I got so frustrated with that fight so many times, and just the sheer number of attempts it took to get to phase 2, and the fact that I only got there like 3 times, that I didn't care about cheesing that part of the fight. And I really would like to beat it completely legit. Of course, the Dragon Slayer armor, definitely, I cheesed that one way too early. Like, I was just so over it that I didn't care enough to not cheese it. But I definitely feel like I robbed myself by cheesing it. And I think really that's probably actually the big thing about this, is that cheesing as many fights as I did, I feel like I definitely cheated myself by not doing the fights legit. If I had done more of them legit, I probably would have enjoyed the game more overall. But so it's definitely, more than anything, it's my own fault that I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have. That's also a really good argument for not making an easy mode in Dark Souls, because, I mean, at least if they were going to make it easier, it would still have to be fairly hard, because I mean, like, maybe easy by Dark Souls standards, but not easy in general, because I feel like you lose so much of it. You lose respect for what it takes to get through these fights if you just make it too easy for yourself, and having an easy mode would do that, in my opinion. Especially, because of the fact that I did cheese like 4 fights, or 3.5 anyway. I mean, I was determined with Soul of Cinder, even though I did find out there was a cheese I could do, that I wasn't going to cheese it. And the big thing was that, for starters, to be able to cheese it, you had to get a bow from the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. And of course, because of the fact that there's no bonfires between the opening one and where you get the stuff you need to cheese it, I was like, nah, Doc, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. But also because it's like, because of the fact that I had cheesed a few fights in the game, and of course with the Nameless King, I got help. I definitely felt like I didn't get as much out of the game as I could have if I had just done everything entirely on my own. Whereas Dark Souls Remastered, there was, I think I summoned people for like a couple of fights, but it never felt like it was making the fight easy for me. It just made it easier, and I still had to do the work. It's still, I still had my own set of challenges with that. So yeah, I mean, I think that this game is amazing, and I think absolutely people should play this one along with the original. If they want to get into a Souls game, this is definitely one of them that is more approachable than Dark Souls 1, but I also feel like I appreciate the strengths of both, and I think Dark Souls 1 just holds kind of more of a special place for me because of everything that it did to introduce me to the Souls genre, or at least to get me more into it than I was before. Even though Elden Ring was really the one that got me into it in the first place, it's just not the one that I stuck with as long. So I think that's all I have to say on that front.
Okay. One more question I have, Dark Souls 3 related. Do you have a favorite boss? Even if it's one that you struggled with, like just because of the way the fight was designed, do you have a favorite?
Let me think here. I think in terms of like overall, that's kind of hard to say. So I really like the Pontiff fight because of the fact that it's one where I didn't struggle with it as much as I was expecting to, and was able to, get through it more quickly. And because it was still just a really cool fight. In some ways, I actually want to say the Soul of Cinder. But more so because the satisfaction of beating him was so significant. And it was definitely the most satisfied I've been with a boss fight in terms of beating it. And beating it entirely on my own. Without cheesing, without getting any summons out to help me. Just did it completely on my own. And it was a long and very difficult road to get to that point. But I was able to do it. So, yeah.
Nice. If you decide to go back to the DLC, just a sort of word of caution. There are at least once per DLC. If it happens more than that, I am not aware of it currently. There are more Soul of Cinder moments as far as you think you're almost done, but you're not done.
Yeah, well.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that one was a little bit different. It was more like, because that one didn't like completely... It didn't completely phase me because like I knew that there had to... I thought that there was supposed to be a phase 2, so when it got to the actual phase 2, I wasn't overly surprised or like mad that it got to a phase 2, just more like, oh, okay, this makes way more sense, because I thought it was odd that, I had heard about there being a phase 2 with him doing the Gwyn stuff, and I hadn't seen that, and I thought it was odd that I hadn't seen him do that at all. But yeah, I mean, I can't say I'm surprised. There's been enough, examples of that in Dark Souls to where like it wasn't surprising to me from that standpoint. It was more just like, oh, okay.
Okay. Going back to Psychonauts, I'm glad that you are enjoying it. I actually have to go back myself and see what happened, because I don't recall the issues with getting it to run on the Steam Deck, and also the control prompts being messed up. So it's been a while since I've played the game, and actually you talking about it makes me want to go back since I never finished it. Mm-hmm. But I do need to go back because I don't remember having that issue. I do remember I had a controller issue one time, but I'm not certain what happened there. So I'll definitely have to look back at my settings and see what happened there and see if anything changes, or if there's anything I know that could help. But I definitely agree. It's just such a very good and fun game. I just out of curiosity, I was trying to see how much gameplay I had, and I've put about 11 hours into it. I will really say more so 10, because about an hour was of me trying to fix the controls and stuff. But I haven't beaten the game yet. Like, I think based on my achievements here, I still have, like, as far as the story goes, looks like I still have about maybe 4 more stages or 4 more levels or something like that.
All right, so then I probably still have quite a ways to go, I would say. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, there's no way I would be close to the end, because I've only opened like 3 doors so far. So so there's definitely still a bunch. It just, the way that the story was going kind of seemed like, oh, this almost seems like it could be something closer to the end, and that would be surprising. But no, that makes a lot more sense that it would be longer than that.
Yeah. Now, there's actually one thing that I forgot to do last year, and so I'm going to try to do it again this year. There is an achievement for purchasing something from the shop during Christmas time, so I can't remember what the range is. So I'm gonna have to make a note of this to play the game again and go to the shop and buy something to unlock an achievement.
It's probably
I missed
something
it last year.
specific because, well, actually, I guess it just depends on what the time frame is. Because I mean, I've purchased things from the shop and haven't gotten any achievements for that. I don't think.
This one's really just like specifically time based, like
Right.
December 25th
Right.
through something.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, around.
It's like you can buy anything. It's just you have to buy something
right
during that
okay.
time period.
Yeah, and that's what I meant was just that.
Oh, yeah,
Obviously, it's not active right now. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have to go back and see what the range is because I can't remember if it's like a week or not or something like that. But I definitely know at least Christmas Day is one of the days.
Nice.
But yeah, it's definitely fun, and I know that eventually, once I finish it, I'll probably end up wanting to play Psychonauts 2, because I've heard a lot of people say that gameplay-wise, it's definitely a step up from the first game.
Nice.
But in considering the fact that I enjoyed the first game so far, it really has me looking forward to what the second game could do.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if I got it on sale through Steam. I think it was through Steam, and it was like $6. It was really cheap for the sequel. I'll have to look and see.
Ooh.
Speaking of which, if you're interested, I don't know if you would be or not. I've always been kind of interested in this series of games, the Oddworld series. Right now on Fanatical is $1 for all the games.
Ooh.
$1 and you get every single game. So
Nice. I will have to check
I went and grabbed it because like I think I briefly tried out one of them on Vita that I had gotten through PS Plus, but I never got super far into it, and I'd always been interested in checking out that series. Let's see here. I know that. Let me look through my library here. I mean, yeah, you can, if you have anything else, then you can do that while I'm figuring this out.
Yeah. Oh shucks. Yeah, I think that was it for that game. Oh, but Superland definitely sounds intriguing. I was looking at some of the footage on Steam, with just the trailer, and it definitely is interesting. I am sort of like concerned based on what you said about the controls, especially for platforming being floaty. But I think the idea, or at least the presentation, looks very good. So I'll definitely keep an eye on that, and maybe like during a good sale, I'll probably get it then. But it definitely sounds interesting.
It should be on sale right now.
Oh, on sale now.
I mean,
Oh yeah, I see now. Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah, it is on sale.
Yeah, it was
68% off.
Yeah, it was because I got it for really cheap. And it looks like Psychonauts is not on sale on the on Steam. It might have been Instant Game that I got it from. Okay, so maybe it's not as cheap as I was thinking. But it is 79% off, or well. Technically, it's not actually 79%. It's less than that because they always mark it up ever so slightly. But it's $13. Might be a little much. I feel like I got it for cheaper than that, but I don't remember. Anyway,
I'm just looking here on Proton DB. I see there are a couple people who did some tweaks to get Superland to work on their Steam decks. I see a couple people said they switched to Proton Experimental. One person used, what was it that they used here? They used okay, I don't know what they're doing here because they have both Steam and desktop listed, so I'm not certain what they did there to fix that. But yeah, it seems like you can get it to work on there. You just have to tweak some stuff as far as like, I guess maybe which Proton version you're using.
gotcha. Well, Yeah, I mean, it was more just like when I initially started it up, I couldn't even get into like the settings menu to mess with it, so I just gave up pretty quickly. And Psychonauts had been another one I was interested in checking out anyway, so I installed that and played that on Steam Deck instead. But if I could get Superland working, I mean, I don't even care if it. I mean, I don't expect it to look anywhere near as good because right now I have it on like all epic settings and it looks really good on my desktop. I ultimately, like, I went back and forth between doing 1080p and 120 frames per set, you know, a lock of 120 frames, or if I wanted to do upscaled, you know, to 4K, or, you know, rendering at 4K downscaled to 1080p at 60, and I ultimately just settled on the latter. But
Oh, now one actually I do see is like using Proton version 7.0.4.
Okay.
That seems to be a common one that people have used for their decks.
all right, does it say anything about performance?
Some people said that performance works pretty well. One person said works like native practically. But
Okay.
I mean, I see a couple people said that they've got some stuttering here and there. But yeah.
All right, I'll have to look into that, see if I can get it working, because I would definitely like to play it on the Steam Deck, because I was enjoying it, but it was just, I was having some issues with that, and of course it ran great on my desktop, so I played it on there.
Well, that is all that I have.
All right, sounds good. Yep. All right, well, let's get into the news. So getting into the news, we have a rumor from Insider Gaming that apparently there is a new Steam console coming from Valve. And this, from what we can tell, does not appear to be like they did with the Steam machines previously, where they had a bunch of different manufacturers all able to put the Steam machine thing on their machine, but more that this is just be its own independent Steam console that Valve itself will be making, and that it would come with the new Steam controller, or I'm sorry. Well, I don't know if it would come with that, but that is just something else that they'd be working on along with the rumored new VR headset. And so there's been a series of posts from a Valve insider, Brad Lynch, that he has posted on social media, I'm assuming on X. Yes. And he said that it would still be using AMD, nothing about the power of the console, just basically that it exists, apparently. And it is approaching the 10-year anniversary of when Valve released its first Steam controller and Steam machine. So that could be a reason for them to do a new one, but regardless, what are your thoughts?
So, I have some mixed thoughts on this. I mean, on one hand, it's kind of interesting that Valve would make something like this. I think that's pretty cool. On the other hand, do we actually need it? Considering the fact that we are in a period where people who want to play on PC either buy a pre-built or they make their own PCs. And I mean, now that, you know, it's easier to find parts. Granted, some manufacturers are raising the prices of their components, sadly, but for the most part, it's pretty simple and straightforward to get what you want. It might be a matter of, you know, whether something's affordable enough, but for the most part, you can still have access to the parts you want for your build. So that being said, do I think that anyone would really want to get something like this? I don't know. I mean, considering the fact that the Steam machine launched, and granted there were different models, but it really didn't sell well, because if people wanted to get I mean, people were just focused on consoles. Now, of course, there are other things that contribute to the you know downfall of the original Steam machine. Was the fact that, I guess, for one thing, well, the major thing actually really is the fact that gaming on Proton is definitely different, vastly different than it is now. I mean, even if you go back 5 years ago, gaming on Linux now is much better. So I mean, considering the fact that back then it was way worse, like compatibility, Proton was not where it needs to be. It's not, gaming in Linux isn't perfect by any means, but it's definitely much of an improvement. But I still don't know if that would be enough to get people to switch, because I mean, sure, you could say the Steam Deck is successful. Well, that's relative. I mean, in the PC handheld market, yeah, I would say it's a success. But if you compare it with consoles, if you compare it with the Switch, the Xbox Series, the PS5, you could compare it to the Wii U. it's still abysmal, because it's sold what, 1-2 million units. I mean, the Wii U at least sold what, 18 million. So it's definitely not a big it's definitely not a big seller. But I mean, maybe depending on what Valve expects this thing to do as far as what it can push, because if it is something like the Steam Deck, where because Valve is making it themselves, if it's something where they're just selling directly from their store, that might, I guess on their end make it more viable. But if it's something that they're trying to, sell in stores like Walmart, Best Buy, Target, whatever GameStop still exists, then I don't know. I really feel like there's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of consoles sitting on the shelves, because for one thing, also, I really feel like it's kind of hard to get a console player to switch over to PC, and there's going to be a mentality of them expecting a full PC experience, and they're not really going to be getting it. Because for one thing, which is something that I've been discussing with people who've left comments on a video I've made about this, is the fact that if someone buys it thinking they're going to get the same Windows treatment, they're going to be disappointed, because of anti-cheats like the ones found in Valorant, the ones found in Apex Legends, and because of the way Rockstar handed things, GTA Online, you can't play those games because of the fact that the anti-cheat, is blocked. Now, part of it is due to the fact of the devs, because of the fact that, as far as with like easy anti-cheat, and even some, oh gosh, I can't remember what the one is that is used by Epic, but as far as those anti-cheats go, Valve worked to be able to get that anti-cheat to work under Linux, but the problem is the devs just don't turn the switch on, so you can't have that compatibility. And so people are gonna think, oh man, I want to play these games, these big competitive shooter games, or these these big major games that are these multiplayer games. So I want to play Rainbow Six Siege on PC, and it's like, oh well, this is an easy way to get into PC gaming, and they're gonna be disappointed because of the fact that it's not what they would expect from a PC as far as gaming goes, just because of the fact that it is running Linux. So that's something that I am also skeptical of. I feel like people might jump into this not knowing what it is, which I think is something that Valve should address if it is true. They should, put straightforward. This is, I mean, sure, even if you put labels here, some people don't pay attention to stuff and will still, you could put neon lights on it and people still won't actually read what's there. But I still feel like they should try to really push the fact that this is Linux based, so that way people have some sort of disclaimer or knowledge of what they can expect. But another concern I have is the fact that this is going to be similar to the Steam machine, because or at least the one that was really pushed, because I guess the main Steam machine that was there, or at least the one that was pushed the most, was the Alienware alpha units, which is the one that I bought. And at least with that one, you can't really upgrade that one. You can change the CPU out, you can change the hard drive if you want. You can, because of the fact that it's using SATA, you could swap in a SATA SSD. You can change the RAM, which, interesting enough, is DDR-L memory, and so it's like using laptop RAM instead of desktop RAM. But you can't change the GPU because that's completely soldered onto the motherboard. So what you have is what you get, and I really feel like even if it is a console, it is still at the end of the day a PC. And because of that, I believe that you should still have the full PC experience. You should still have the freedom of a PC to upgrade it, to switch out parts if you want to. And I mean, sure, if it's got a unique case, it's going to be harder. But I still feel like, say for example, someone did want to use an AMD GPU because this one is supposed to be using AMD. So they want to use NVIDIA. Or they even want to use Intel, they can't do that because if it is, purely soldered on, if you can't upgrade it, then they're pretty much stuck with that. So I wish that even if they just decided, okay, this is the one we have, this is the one that we're gonna, just present to you. If they at least have the ability to, say they have just like a slot that you can just stick a GPU in there and, have at it. I think they should still have the option. Even if people don't want to, I think it's good if people have that choice. I mean, if they just say, we have enough space in our console for, say, at most a 3-slot GPU. So if you want to, put in some crazy 4080, 4090 card, you're out of luck there because that's 4 slots. But if they at least gave a little bit of room for people to upgrade some stuff, I think that would be great. It also would extend the longevity of the console itself because, hey, the hardware's a bit old here. It's kind of struggling in some games. I like to, play some more stuff. If I could switch out a part here and there, that could, give me some more power out of this. I could get some more out of this console. I wish that was a thing, but it seems like it's not, based upon the fact that what did it say here in the article? That like the HDMI port is hardwired to the card directly. So it looks like that's just part of the motherboard, and so the GPU is completely soldered onto there, and there's no actual output for that you would have for a dedicated GPU. I don't expect it to do well, but I'll save some other stuff after, because the comments that I read did give me a lot of insights. So I guess just based on my raw opinions, that's what I have for the Steam machine.
All right. Anyway, so in terms of my thoughts on this Steam console, I do think that compared with the original Steam machines, this one has a much better job of actually succeeding, just in the simple fact that it is, assuming it's just one model instead of doing a bunch of different models, that will help a lot. Like you said, the fact that Proton SteamOS is significantly further along and a completely different spot from where it was back when they released the Steam machines will also make a big difference, because because you can play the majority of games nowadays. It's just obviously, like you said, the anti-cheat stuff that gets in the way. I mean, Destiny 2 is a great example of a game that you won't be able to play on there, at least, not without Windows, which is, of course, annoying that they have issues like that. But in general, at least it should, in theory, be able to run a lot of things. Some other thoughts that I had regarding that is, I wonder if this could be something that would be more powerful than the PS5 Pro. It wouldn't be hard for them to do. They could sell the consoles at a loss if they wanted to. Now, is it going to beat out the PS5 Pro in terms of sales? No, not a chance. Absolutely no chance of that. However, it could be the gateway for some people. Could be what actually gets them into PC, because like some people, they're not that interested in the Steam Deck because it is a little limited on power and not everybody likes to play handheld gaming. But if this rumored Steam console is a legitimate thing, Valve could build something that meets or exceeds the PS5 Pro if they wanted to. Not saying they will. You know, maybe charge a little bit more for it. Maybe not. Actually, realistically, I think they probably could get away with charging the same amount that the PlayStation charges for the PS5 Pro and be able to make something that's more powerful. That being said, it's hard to say whether or not this would be successful from that standpoint. Like you said, it's kind of hard to define the success because it is such a different market. If you're bringing it into the console space, obviously there's going to be people who will look at this and they'll say, oh, it's a failure because it doesn't sell as much as the consoles. But the reality is that it's still technically a PC. And so it's such a weird comparison from that standpoint. Now, of course, right now we don't even know that this thing is a real thing. I believe it probably is, but it's hard to say from that standpoint whether or not it would be something that would sell super well. I mean, I think it would be successful it would be significantly more successful than the Steam machines were, but still nowhere near the level of regular consoles. I do think that it has the potential to be something that is able to draw more people into PC gaming just because they'd have the option of getting something that gives them that couch experience. They don't have to have the weakness of the Steam Deck, because the Steam Deck has its weaknesses, of course, and they still get the benefits of PC gaming from the standpoint of the massive Steam library and all of that. It's just obviously compatibility, at least unless you can get companies like Easy Anti-Cheat and all that to work with Linux, certainly makes the number of games available lesser than it would be otherwise. So, now in terms of whether or not I would buy something like this, no. I mean, there's a reason why I don't buy a console, and even if this thing were more powerful than the PS5 Pro, than the Series X, I still just don't want to buy a console. Like, I would much rather have, if I'm going to have to sit down at a screen that's, not in my hands, that I can't just, turn off and on as I please, put to sleep and boot back up whenever, I have a few minutes to play, then I'd rather just be playing on my PC. Because at that point it's like, well, there's no benefit to having a console. I mean, if I want to play my PC on my TV in the living room, all I have to do is stream it, and because it's wired, it's low latency. I mean, virtually no latency. I can still get 60 frames per second on my games, and it's a great experience. I just don't do that very often because it's a better experience on my monitor than it is playing on TV screen. So, but I think that's pretty much all I have to say from that standpoint.
Okay. Now, two things I actually forgot. Now, two things that I'm very excited about, that if this is true, I hope that this helps develop these along. And one is the fact of possibly getting a SteamOS 3 for desktop, since it currently only works for the Steam Deck, and there's no official build that's suited for a desktop. I would really hope that this pushes that development alone, so there's official full release, so people can install it on their PCs if they want to. If they want to make their own little mini Steam machines, that's something they could also do with that. Because I mean, like at best right now, we like I said earlier, we only have the unofficial OSs that try to do that, like Chimera OS, Nobara, and Bazite. But to actually have a full official Steam OS for people to use would be great. And in light of the fact that the HoriPad disappointed me, I would really love to have a good Steam controller too. And I mean, I keep thinking about the fact that if I had a Steam Deck without the screen in my hand, that would be a great controller to have.
Yes,
I mean,
100%.
having the control sticks, having the gyro, having the back pedals, I mean, having the touchpads for when I feel like using them.
Yep.
Like it's just great. That would be exactly what I want. So that's another reason why I would like this to be true, because of the fact that it would mean we could possibly get a Steam controller too, and that would be great. That would be great. Now there were a couple comments that I received on my video that really gave me some thoughts. One thing was the fact that I can't remember where it was, but something about I don't think it was in this particular article, but somewhere that possibly of that this might not even completely be a console itself. It could be a hybrid system, not necessarily a Steam Deck, but something still that is hybrid as far as being portable, but still a stationary system.
So a
So
console.
I'm curious.
I mean, that's what a console is. It's technically portable, but it's still stationary.
Yeah, so like I'm not certain. Like I would have to look more into that, but I'm not sure. And then one thing that was mentioned about as far as contributing to the failure of the original Steam machine was the fact that Valve did something similar to 3DO did back in the 90s, which was they actually released the Steam machines at full price, and they didn't sell at a loss. So they sold the Steam machines for like $500, $700, and that really killed it, considering the fact that the Xbox 360 and even the PS3 were cheaper devices to get. So that definitely did not help them. But considering the fact that, as you said, the PS5 is $700. If they were to sell the Steam machine at $700, it would be more palatable. People would be more willing to digest that, especially if people say, "Oh, you gotta spend like $500,000 to build a good gaming PC. You need to take a loan out. You need to sell a kidney so you can buy it because PC parts are so expensive. You can't buy a PC for under $1,500. That runs things better than 2013 games, but if they did make a Steam console that was within that price range, $500, $700, it would possibly do better because it's a more arguable. I mean, consider the fact that, like I said, consoles now are more expensive. It's something that people would be more willing to buy. So it definitely could help. I would probably see it being more $700, considering the fact that the Steam Deck is, the limited edition is $650. What's like the highest tier one? Is that like $550? Like if you get the 1 terabyte model, that's not like a limited edition.
No, it's $650 for that. Remember, it was like $730 or something like that for the limited edition.
Okay.
Or something like that. I can't remember the exact amount, but yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So considering the fact that the Steam Deck is that much, I think it probably would be $700 having the Steam console. Now I will say this, partially out of morbid curiosity, and partially because I already was crazy enough to buy a Steam machine. Granted, I got that one for much less than people who bought it at launch. I probably would get the Steam machine too, just to see what it can do. Just possibly, if I wanted to say do something on a couch. Granted, like similar to what you said, I could, stream it from a PC to the TV. But I feel like it would just be very interesting to me to try it out and also, see if there's anything else that could possibly be done, especially saying, hey, is there something that interesting, like if I could do something interesting with my Steam Deck and connect it with it, I would be curious to see that. So I probably would get one, but I would still have to learn more, get more information on it, especially if it's something like, especially if I'm wrong, it's like $1,000, then I would definitely wait a whole while before I would get one. But I am curious enough that I would say I would be interested in getting one if it is true. But yeah, that's everything now that I have regarding the Steam machine.
Good stuff. All right, so we have a couple of smaller stories here before we get into talking about Game Awards. And we're just going to cover a couple of these small stories, and then after we cover those things, we are going to record the rest of it after the Game Awards so that we can talk about the announcements that were at the Game Awards. But for these smaller stories, we had talked last week about these accessories that were being developed for the Switch 2 that seemed to give the idea that it was coming pretty soon. We were really skeptical about some of them just because of where they were coming from. However, recently, Satisfy, which is a company that makes a grip for the Nintendo Switch, has on their website for pre-order the grip for the next Switch, which they say is going to be shipping in spring 2025. Now, the one thing that to me makes this more believable than the other ones is because I have had the Satisfy grip for my Switch for some time. Let me see if I can. There's my case. So this is the Satisfy grip, and it's like extra. Get a good angle. There we go. So I'll put my Switch in it so you can kind of see what it looks like with that. All of the comparisons that I've done have been using this grip. Basically, what it does is it, of course, adds a lot more grip to the back so that you have a lot more to grab onto. But at the same time, it also does the left side at like more of an angle so that when you're holding it, it's a lot easier to hold the joystick on the right side, or the right side, without it being as uncomfortable as it would be otherwise, because especially when you have big hands, it's just like it's an awkward angle, and this makes it feel a lot more natural, so it's a lot more comfortable. And I love their grips. I had one for my V2 Switch, and then when I upgraded to the OLED, I had to get a new one because it didn't fit with the OLED. But they have right now on their website the grip for the Switch 2, which is based off of their newer design that mine is not, where it's actually dockable, so you can keep it on your Switch rather than having to pull it off every time you want to stick it in the dock. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of a brief summary of my thoughts on the matter. I'll get more into it after you have a chance to talk about it as well.
Yeah, so when I saw this, I was very skeptical about it. I thought it was similar to what happened last week when we were discussing Switch accessories. But since you mentioned that it is from the same company that made your grip, and that you really like, and you said it's a good quality and that it's pretty reputable, I think then that maybe this is legit. I'm interested in knowing though then how many manufacturers have sat down and seen a Switch, because I mean something like this, compared with what we were looking at last week, having this much detail, as far as the build of it, that's not something you would just figure out just by sticking your hand in a box, feeling around the Switch, and making guesses as far as like how large it is, how getting all the measurements and stuff. Because when you're making something that's made to fit within a particular device, you need to be very specific because you can't make it too big, you can't make it too small, you can't make it too wide, you can't make it too long. Otherwise, you're gonna have issues, especially if they're, well, I mean, it's just a grip. It's not like it actually has any other sort of, I guess, connection to it. It
Right.
doesn't have okay, so it doesn't have a connection. So because of that, then it's fine on that end. But for the ones that probably say they do have some sort of connectivity, then you definitely need to get that fixed as well. And also because of the fact that, as you said, it looks like it's going to fit. It's dockable. That means, could the dock be different as well? I mean, is there something different with the Switch 2 dock? So that means they would possibly have to have also seen the dock and have the measurements for that. Because again, if the dock is different enough, there could be issues as far as trying to get that in there. So, let alone knowing the measurements of the Switch itself, they also would have access to the dock and know what that's like as well. So that's definitely also interesting as well. Now, one question I actually do have for you, because something that I saw in the photos is that it looks like on the back there are two, I guess, slots for sticking in game cartridges. Is that correct? Is that what you have on yours?
Mine does not have that, but I think that was something that they started doing with this new version. Yeah, at least. Well, let me double check. I don't think mine. Yeah, no, mine doesn't have that. I feel like they may have started doing that with the newer version of the grip that is dockable, which mine is not, because mine has the bar going right across the back, and so you can't slide it in the dock. Whereas the new ones, it goes up higher so that it fits on top of the dock and you can keep it on, which I definitely am hoping to get one of those at some point. And depending on whether or not the reveal of the Switch 2 ends up showing a whether or not it ends up showing, I can't even remember what my thought was. Whether or not the Switch 2 has an OLED screen would determine whether I would rather try and get a dockable grip for the OLED, or if I'd rather just wait and then when the Switch 2 comes, just get one of those. I mean, I'm leaning more towards probably not getting an upgraded grip for the OLED, just because while I could use it, I don't really have a whole lot of purpose for it apart from convenience. But I mean, if the Switch 2 does not come with an OLED screen by default, I'd be much more likely to upgrade before then. So anyway, or rather upgrade my grip. That's what I'm trying to say. So did you have any other thoughts on that?
No, sir.
There was one thing I was going to say, and I've already forgotten what it was. So, whatever it was, it probably wasn't that important. I guess right now, just waiting to see what happens. Hopefully, we'll get something soon. I mean, technically, it's possible we could get something at the Game Awards. However unlikely that might be. But I do hope that we see something one way or another very soon. So. All right. Let's go into our next story. So you want to talk real quick about this Microsoft wanting to make Xbox app the home for PC gaming.
Yeah, so recently Microsoft updated the Xbox app on Windows, and one thing they did was they brought over 400 titles that previously weren't available on the Xbox app, and they're working on also on bringing more games over as well, and also working on crossplay between Xbox versions on console and PC, and also other versions. But they also really just want to work on the app itself, what's special with the Xbox Play Anywhere, and the idea is to make it, as The Verge calls it, the place to find PC games, regardless of whether they're part of PC Game Pass or not. And Yeah, and I mean the article pretty much gives more information as far as like what they're trying to work on developing. They're trying to work on a new UI for the app as well, and they also added a jump back in section that lets you quickly get back to recent games, like you could do on Xbox console as well. And that's pretty much. Oh, it also wait, there one last thing here also was that or well, actually, this was just a question they had about saying whether the company wants to list Steam, Epic Games, or itch.io games in the app as well. Sort of again to get those games, or I guess as Microsoft wants to make Xbox, the Xbox app, the place to get your games, 'cause if they want to have everything localized within the app itself, which is interesting, which I sort of have my own thoughts on as far as why that could happen, but I will save those for after you give me yours.
All right, so to kind of keep it as simple as possible, I think that this, I understand the theory behind it, what they're trying to do, but apart from the fact that my previous experience, at least with the Xbox PC app, was that it was not good. Because there's only been one time where I specifically purchased a game through that, and it was just because it was a game I wanted to support at launch, which was the Gunk. And the only reason I went for that was because I like Image and Form, and they were responsible for that game. Ended up being an okay game. I mean, I played it and beat it. But it wasn't like anything super special. It was nowhere near as good as like their SteamWorld Dig games, which are the main ones that I love. But regarding the Xbox app itself, I just wasn't impressed with it. And it's something that I only used for that one game, and I haven't used it since. The idea of it being able to display like Steam games and that sort of thing, my issue with that idea is that it sounds like they'll basically make it so you have to run two apps at once. Because you have to run the Steam app in addition to running the Xbox app in order for your Steam games to be displayed. Now, if there's some way around that, then I could see this being an okay thing. But it's still a hard sell for me in terms of making that changeover, because they really have to provide something significant to make it worth making the change. And on top of that, of course, the fact that I have the Steam Deck as well. So then Steam is just, built into that. It makes sense to use it. Steam is where I have the vast majority of my games, other than the stuff I have through GOG, which, man, I just want to, as a quick side mention, Amazon Prime had a bunch of free GOG games. I added like 20 games in one day. And some of them were like games I actually really wanted. So it's just like, sweet, I'll take it. And I finally figured out how to get the offline installers downloaded. So I've downloaded some of those, and I'll probably start putting some on the Steam Deck without having to use Galaxy, because I really don't like having to have an extra launcher on top of having to do the games. And also, I want to mention, I'm just going off on a little bit of a GOG tangent. Because I hadn't looked that closely at a lot of them before, I mostly just kind of added them, and apart from a few exceptions, haven't really played them. The GOG versions of some of these games come with like a lot of extra stuff. Like you'll get the game manual, and you'll get the soundtrack, and just extra stuff that like I wouldn't have expected to have at all included with everything. It's like, this is great. I love it. But anyway, yeah, so basic TLDL is that I do not like the Xbox app. While I think that it could end up being good, theoretically, it's just a really hard sell for me. So that's what I got on that.
Yeah, I believe my personal theory is just the fact that this is really part of Microsoft's, I guess, Xbox initiative, trying to say, this is an Xbox, this is an Xbox. And so part of doing that is really just trying to make the Xbox app they're trying to push it as much as possible. And I mean, I think it's great though that all those games that weren't available when the Xbox app are now available. So people who probably wanted to play it there now have that ability. I think at the end of the day, the more places people can get their games, the better. So even if it's just on the Xbox app, I still think that's a great thing. Even if I don't use it myself, I think that's a good thing. Is that these games are all going over there. Now at the same time though, similar to what you said, as far as like with using Steam, Epic Game Store, itch.io, I'm not certain how much sense it makes, because again, you're just having a launcher for a launcher, which is already something I'm not fond of enough as it is on Steam. So it really kind of defeats the point of doing that when it's like, yeah, I could open up the Xbox app to do that, but to play my Steam games, but why not just open up Steam to play my Steam games? It just kind of defeats the purpose on that in that end. Now, granted, I feel like this is kind of obvious. As a Linux gamer, it won't matter to me anyway, since can't use Xbox stuff on Linux, so it doesn't really matter that much. I think as far as in general though, would PC gamers be interested in using Xbox app to run all their games? I don't know. I doubt it, actually, because I mean, similar to, I guess, one thing I said about with console gamers and trying to switch over to a theoretical Steam machine, even if this one is better than the original. With consumers, if they're already used to something that they've used for a long time, unless something major happens that's catastrophic, they're very hard pressed to switch over to something different. Even if something could be different, unique, or even better, they're really going to be hard pressed to switch over. And I feel like a lot of gamers are used to Steam, so switching over to Xbox app, and similar to what you said, from what I've heard, is it hasn't been that great. It's gotten better, especially with Game Pass being involved, but as a whole, people just really don't use it all that much. Right. So you're going to be hard pressed to get PC gamers to move over to the app if there's really little incentive to do so. Since they're already used to, like, say, using Steam, what reason would they have to go over there if there's nothing really that's different or does anything better? So yeah, I really don't see this doing too well. It might be decent enough. I mean, especially if, well, Game Pass probably could help, but I mean, they said that there would be games that are on there that even aren't on Game Pass. So, I mean, Game Pass could help it, but I don't see it doing incredibly well. Yeah, so that's really all I got to say on that end.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we're going to come back after the Game Awards here shortly, but just briefly want to mention before we go in, there is basically Jason Schreier was recently interviewed, and I believe it was just on a podcast. I can't remember which one it was. I don't have all the information in front of me right now, but he said that there's at least 2 big reveals that are like, wow, that's finally happening. And the things that came to mind, at least for some people, the possibility that the Game Awards could reveal Half-Life 3 and or Bloodborne remaster. Any thoughts on that?
I really don't see how some people. I'm gonna be honest. I don't see how some people got to Half-Life 3, considering the fact that there has been little incentive for Valve to actually make it, even though people have wanted it for years. Now, granted, that would actually be something where you would say, "Oh wow, that's here." That is that type of game. But I feel like that is so far out of left field that it's the last thing that would be on my mind would be Half-Life 3. Now, Bloodborne Remastered. Well, actually, I would argue that some people really want it to be here. And so because of that, granted, people would also say because they want it, it's not going to be here. That that they would say, oh, they wouldn't say, oh wow, that's here. But I don't know. I mean, granted, with Half-Life Alyx coming, some odd years ago, maybe that gave Valve a push to make another game. And also, I don't know how Half-Life Alyx ended or anything like that. If there was like some sort of teaser for a new game or something like that, since similar to you, can't play it since it's on VR. But if there is something there that gave people a reason to expect a new game, a new Half-Life game, then maybe we could be getting Half-Life 3. But do I expect to see it? No, I do not expect to see it. Could there be something interesting? I definitely believe there could be something interesting new. I mean, considering the fact that, I mean, it's not the same thing, but we got, I think Sekiro was announced at the Game Awards one year. So anything is possible. Something very new and shocking could be revealed, but we'll definitely see tomorrow.
All right. The only things that give me any sort of hopium on this is, just some realities that, like you said, the fact that this is like, oh, this would be something huge to be revealed, especially because we've been, waiting for this for literally, I think 2007 was when Half-Life 2 Episode 2 came out. So it's been, coming up on 20 years. I mean, it's still technically a couple years out, 2+ years out to the actual 20th anniversary. But even still, if it was coming, if they revealed it, it would be pretty amazing. And, of course, Half-Life Alyx was the first new Half-Life game in a long time, and it takes place in between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2. And then, you had that they just had the 20th anniversary for Half-Life 2 and gave the game out for free with some updates. Could be that they're gearing people up for Half-Life 3, but, once again, hopium, and that's all it is. So I think that's good enough at this point. We're going to come back and, go ahead.
Actually, one thing that I thought about earlier that I was saving for this section actually is a question I had for you. Because of the fact that Jason Schreier said that these games will be something that come out later on, it's not something like a next year game, it's something that'll come out within a few years from now. Do you think, if this is true, do you think Half-Life 3 would be something that would, say, come bundled with a Steam Machine too, since that also is something that could come out in the future?
That's an interesting thought, and I would say that's definitely possible. I mean, it would definitely... I mean, I don't know that it would necessarily be a quote-unquote console seller unless they only did it on that, but I don't imagine that Valve would do that because they don't really do the exclusive thing anymore. I mean, basically the only thing that's technically exclusive right now that I can think of is the... whatever that mini Portal game is that came for the Steam Deck. But, I mean, that's just like a little thing that shows off what the Steam Deck can do in terms of its gimmicks and all that. So, yeah. All right, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, so we are going to come back after the Game Awards and talk about our highlights, any surprises that we had, that sort of thing. Well, really just more the surprises, so... We'll be back. And we're back, and that was a Game Awards for sure. So I guess we can just individually go through our different things. So why don't you start off with what was the first thing that stood out to you?
All right, so I was right, and I was wrong. We did get Half-Life 3 582 over days. So I mean, I I think Valve is starting to learn how to count like Square is. And I mean, they already did Half-Life Episode 1, also Half-Life Episode 2, and Half-Life Episode 2, and stuff like that. And now they're like, okay, what else can we cram in? And I mean, what's next? Half-Life Birth by Sleep? Chain of Memories? I don't know. Valve, get your act together, Valve.
Yeah, that was really shocking. But what was even more shocking about it was that it was confirmed that Valve was purchased by Sony in that, and that Half-Life 358 over 2 days is going to be PlayStation 5 Pro exclusive. It won't even run on the original PS5. It's going to be so advanced with the PSSR that it is going to require the infinite power of the PSS5 the PS5 Pro. And, between the magical SSD and PSSR, that is what is required to run Half-Life 3. So, or Half-Life 358 over 2 days. That's so hard to get used to. I never would have thought that Valve would pull that Nomura nonsense, but I mean, it looks good. At least what few images they've shown. But I kind of figured after, we saw Half-Life Alyx looking so good, I mean, because it really does look great, that it wasn't terribly surprising that they would have Half-Life 358 over 2 days. Of course, this one takes place in between Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Half-Life 2 Episode 2, so it's kind of another filler. It is another filler rather than getting the actual Half-Life 3, but, 358 over 2 days, and you play as a member of the Combine in this, so that intro that we've been using since the beginning of having the Combine masks over our faces, now we're actually going to get to be a Combine with the indistinguishable language of what they say when they talk. So.
Oh, and also one last thing. Don't forget the because Sony bought Valve and made this exclusive to the PS5. There is a special mode, the cinematic mode, where you play the game, the first-person shooter, at 24 FPS. So
yeah, because that's the
cinematic.
better way to play.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely, for sure. All right. Well, what was also a surprise, Nintendo actually did show up at the Game Awards, and they announced the Switch 2, which is coming out actually next week. It's going to be $850 and will be sold exclusively through Nintendo's online store. It will not have an OLED version, but it also won't have an LCD version. It will have two options, either a plasma screen option or a CRT option. And it's an extra fat boy too. It weighs about 50 pounds. At least that's the rumor. That's not the actual amount. It's probably more like about 10 pounds because you're basically carrying around a CRT. It's a smaller CRT, of course, because it has to be quote unquote portable. But yeah, it's going to be $850. So it looks like Nintendo took Sony's ideas with the PS5 Pro and took it to the next level. I guess on the plus side, it does have a 2 terabyte hard drive built in, or 2 terabyte SSD rather. So yeah, it's a big beefy boy. And next week, that's considering the fact that every time Nintendo sells something exclusively through their website crashes. This is definitely going to crash. Wow. I did not see that coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nintendo was sick and tired of people asking for the Switch 2, that they said, fine, you want the Switch 2? We're dropping it next week. So, I mean, we got what we wanted. Definitely wish we kind of had more, of a heads up about this. That would be nice. But, I mean, yeesh, people are definitely going to be really fighting for that before Christmas.
Right, no kidding.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, before Christmas, because, I mean, it's coming out next week, and next week is the week before Christmas, so... That's gonna be interesting to say the least.
Yep. I feel sorry for people though who just bought a regular Switch for their kids and stuff. Then now they're like, "Mom, Dad, I want the new Switch," and they just bought it.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
Yep.
All right, what's your next thing?
The next thing was, I definitely agree. This is definitely one of those, oh wow, I can't believe that this is here. And, kind of was right about this as well. Bloodborne Remastered. However, the only caveat is that it is a PlayStation Portal exclusive. Sony really wanted to push the fact that the Portal is, a must-have device. They said, you know what? We're gonna make this a must-have device. We're gonna give you Bloodborne Remastered. That's something you wanted. Now you can only play it through streaming. So, you get to have all the benefits of streaming and potential latency issues in a game where you don't want to have latency issues. You can have that right on your portable device that's streaming. So I hope you have good reception if you're outside your house. Then if you're playing on some hotspots, then I hope that this works for you. I'll definitely have to pick up a Portal eventually so I can try this game. But yeah, that definitely was a surprise. Definitely was not what I expected. But we got Bloodborne, so I guess we should be happy.
But I mean, really, it's not on PC though, so it's like
that's true.
I mean, like I said, streaming only. They're targeting 60 frames per second with ray tracing. Targeting 60 frames per second with ray tracing, and of course, it's streaming only, so you have to stream it with a PlayStation Portal, and yeah, no PC version, at least not yet. I mean, we'll probably get one eventually, but maybe when we get to 2035, that's when they'll finally release the PC version, and and then do that along with the PlayStation 6 or 7, wherever we are by that. I guess it would probably be PlayStation 7 by that point, but and then they'll finally get 60 frames per second locked, and it will upscale from 1080p to 8K. So,
just gotta wait, a good just over 10 years. So,
and by that point, they'll have PSS SSR.
Yes.
Or PS SSR. So yes, PlayStation Super Spectral Resolution. So they'll have an extra S in there. It'll be the upgraded version of PSSR. Or no, I guess I'm wrong. It will. I mean, because currently it's PlayStation. It's just the P is PlayStation Super Spectral Resolution or whatever, and the upgraded version that will be with the PS7 or whatever will be PlayStation Super Spectral Resolution. Or a Super Special Spectral Resolution, whatever. Anyway, point is, Bloodborne, exclusive to PlayStation Portal. That is crazy. I'm not buying a PlayStation Portal for that. At that point, I would rather play it on PS4 base than stream it. Because after all, 30 frames per second is the better way to play it, according to that one chick, who I'm sure you've seen the comments, responses to that garbage. Okay. For the last thing that really stood out to me, so Mario's 40th anniversary is next year, and I'm really surprised Nintendo showed up as much as they did, but they showed off their first 40th anniversary game that's going to be coming out, and that is Mario Paint Deluxe. It is going to require a separate purchase of a custom Mario-themed mouse to play, and it's going to be the game itself will retail still at $60. Fair enough, even if it is for just Mario Paint, but the mouse will retail at $99.99. So that's a thing, I guess. And I don't really have much of any other thoughts on the matter. I never played the original Mario Paint. I do remember there being one of the Strong Bad cartoons where they drew it all in Mario Paint, and it was fantastic. But otherwise, yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I actually owned Mario Paint. I know I didn't have the mouse, but I feel like I did buy the cartridge, at least from some retro game store. It's very interesting that they would bring it back though after all these years. But I mean, I guess, similar to a couple other franchises in recent memory, Nintendo has been trying to sort of revive old IPs. So I mean, this is one they definitely could revive the Paint. I guess make it a new series, the Paint series. Maybe there might be crossovers in the future. Who knows? We might have like Donkey Kong Paint, Legend of Zelda Paint, F-Zero Paint, Metroid Paint. I don't think Nintendo should just stop here. And I mean, maybe next year we could even get some special controllers based upon franchises or special character ones. So I'm looking forward to maybe seeing what happens here. I'm a bit miffed by the price though. $100 for a mouse. I don't know. It feels a bit
And it's
steep.
wired too.
And it's wired. Yeah. I mean, consider the fact that you could buy a wired mouse at any store for PC for, less than $20. This is kind of But hey, it's got the branding.
Oh, but it does have HD Rumble in it as well.
Oh, yeah, that is true. That is true. Nintendo still believes in HD Rumble. I forget about that.
Yeah, it'll feel like you're actually drawing with the mouse. So, got to make use of that HD Rumble. All right, that's all I have in terms of the stuff that stood out. Did you have anything else?
Just one last thing I had, and I in light of what happened with Valve and Sony, I am really surprised to see this. And the fact that Sony even allowed this is the sort of a partnership between all three companies, between sort of Valve, Sony, since they own it now, it's Valve now, and Microsoft, is the Steam Machine 2 actually is existing. And not only is it existing, but they made a point to say that the Steam Machine 2 is also an Xbox. So once again, we have another Xbox device that you can play. So, despite the fact that it uses Linux, it's still an Xbox. You can still play your Xbox games on there. So I stand corrected about the fact that, my opinion doesn't matter since the Steam Machine would use Linux and it's apart from Microsoft and Xbox. Nope, this is an Xbox as well. So, hey, Xbox app coming right there to it as well. New way to play games. So I'm going to try it out. I'm going to actually download the Xbox app on my PC since that also is now technically an Xbox as well. So, hey, I'm an Xbox.
Yeah, we learned that last week. Or a couple weeks ago, whenever that was. So, yeah. All right. Yeah. That was pretty much it. I mean, there was like a handful of not surprising announcements. Winners of the different awards were just pretty much obvious. Although, actually, I will say I was pretty surprised that Concord won Game of the Year. I mean, considering the fact that it didn't actually get nominated for anything, although I'd accidentally previously said that it got nominated, I meant Dragon Age Veilguard was what got nominated, because that got a nomination, but Concord didn't even get a nomination, but I guess there was enough write-ins that they made Concord Game of the Year, so that was shocking to everyone. I heard an audible gasp in the audience.
Maybe that's what Jason Schreier really meant. There will be a gasp.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That was here?
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting that game.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, anything else before we close out for the night?
No, sir.
All right, recommendations and dissuasions.
Right, so my recommendation is going to be A Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, last year I recommended the 1951 Christmas Carol, but this year I rewatched Muppet Christmas Carol, and that movie is so much better than I remember it. And I mean, Michael Caine does such a great job as Scrooge, and I think the balance between his serious performance and the comedic timing of the Muppets is such a great blend that it brings the story to a whole new level that is really enjoyable. And so I really recommend giving that movie a watch because it's definitely one of the best Christmas Carol adaptations.
Yeah, we watched that one for the first time last year because I think my sister gave it to us for Christmas and we watched it and really enjoyed it. So it's going to definitely be part of our rotation every year because it was great. I loved it. My recommendations. So I will put a shout out quickly for a Christmas movie that we've watched every year for a number of years that we watched this past week, and that is The Family Man with Nicolas Cage. Came out in 2000, and it's still just it's a quite a good movie. Like Nicolas Cage movies are kind of hit or miss for the most part in terms of whether they're actually like good or just garbage. But this one we really like, and we've been watching it, I think, almost every year that we've been married, at least for probably at least 10 years, potentially more than that. I can't remember exactly, but, we've gone from being really early in our marriage to now we're further along in our marriage than they were in the movie, because in the movie they were at 13 years, and, we're at 15, coming up on 16 next year, so it's just interesting watching it, but it's a good movie, so I definitely recommend that. I'm also gonna recommend that when it comes to the difficult bosses in Dark Souls, especially when it comes to the last boss, keep trying, don't give up, don't give into the cheese mentality, because it's much more satisfying to actually beat it legit. And like, I obviously totally understand cheesing. Obviously I ended up doing a lot of cheesing, but I also regret a lot of that cheesing because I just feel like I robbed myself of the experience by cheesing as many bosses as I did. So yeah, I'm definitely going to recommend that. I don't think it's bad to cheese, a boss or two, but I think that if you get too much in that habit, it just takes away from the enjoyment of the experience and how good it feels to actually conquer those challenges. So, last recommendation I have is make sure that if you make sure that if you're using Windows, make sure your system recovery is set up so that it backs up every one of your drives, because in my case, when I had the issue earlier where I accidentally deleted a bunch of stuff, mostly videos, I didn't realize until after I did my recovery that it only had my main drive backed up and not my other two drives. So even though it's only one of the drives that was actually affected by it, it's still a bunch of video footage that I lost, potentially more files than that. And while I should theoretically be able to recover the stuff, it's still just an inconvenience at best. And potentially a lot worse. In my case, the fact that they got so many things got permanently deleted is just like, it's frustrating, and hopefully I can recover what I lost. But if I can't recover it, then while some of it is stuff I could redo, because most of it's just like gameplay footage, there's some gameplay footage that either would be very difficult to redo or would just be straight up impossible. Like some of my footage from Destiny 1 that I had recorded, particularly some PvP matches, and there's a handful of them that are just, I was absolutely terrible, but then there's some that was like, things just went right the whole match, and it was so satisfying, and I was so happy that I had it recorded, and yeah. So anyway, make sure you have whatever, check your system recovery settings, make sure that it's set up to back up whatever drives you have. And that's what I got for recommendations. So dissuasions.
All right, so my dissuasion is going to be pretty straightforward, and that is do not over tighten your screws. It's not something that I've personally done, but something that I've experienced as far as with buying stuff. And primarily I thought about this only because with the Steam machine, as I was trying to open it up to just upgrade or to swap out the hard drive, one of the screws was just so tightened that I really couldn't get it to work. And I tried everything, tried using different screws, and eventually I decided just to try using a flathead, and that seemed to be the one thing that would get the screw to come out. And then there's one other time where someone had tightened the screw for an NES to the point that the screw was actually stripped, so that was virtually impossible to get out, and I never actually did get that screw out. So don't over tighten your screws. You're gonna make things a whole lot worse for yourself down the road. You do want it to be tight and in there, but you don't want to get to the point where you could possibly damage whatever you're screwing it in, even if it's not like a piece of hardware. If you're doing it for a home project or working in wood, that's not really a great thing there. And then it just makes it hard to remove it anyway. And that's way worse than having something be maybe a little too loose. So definitely don't over tighten it.
Always good. My dissuasion is make sure that, do not delete files without making sure that you haven't selected more than you mean to. Because unfortunately, I deleted a bunch of files today that I did not mean to. Thankfully, nothing was critical, and if it's gone for good, then it's not the end of the world, but it's still frustrating because I don't know to what extent it was. I think basically it was essentially that when I was selecting files, I must have still had my videos folder selected at the time. And so when I went to delete some other video files, because I was just trying to clean out some of the extra ones I had, it deleted a large majority of the videos that were in that folder. A lot of the gameplay videos I had recorded over the years, some of which are things that wouldn't be that hard to re-record. It's I wouldn't have that particular moment necessarily, but I could still get the gameplay footage if I wanted it. But then there's some stuff that is just like stuff from Destiny 1. I can't even technically play Destiny 1 anymore without PlayStation Plus, and I don't have PlayStation Plus. So that would be the only way that I would even be able to go back in there. And even then, there's no way that I would be able to replicate the footage that I had. So it's just gone. And unless I can recover it, which, we'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, that's what I got.
That's definitely good advice.
All right, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Xeracon. That's IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. Last video I put out was just discussing the Steam Machine 2 rumors. The next video, well, let's see, today's the 11th. So the next video will be sort of a retrospect over this past year based upon my experience with Linux, since this year was really me trying to go full Linux. So since Valve is going to release the game review on the 14th, then I'll be able to look at that, look at the data, and then also see, what games have I played over this past year, just to show sort of how gaming analytics and sort of Proton has come, how far it's come, and so see if show that gaming underneath Linux is more possible than people might realize. Of course, like I said, there are limitations still, but it is possible if you aren't trying to go for solely multiplayer experience. And then I still need to finalize the time, but next Friday, I should say, is when I will be doing my live stream of Batman Arkham Origins and seeing how long I can play the game until I die.
Nice. All right. Well, you can find me on my YouTube gaming channel at TheFrozenGamer87. Lately, it's mostly just been putting up clips from the show, but God willing, on Monday, what would be, that's like the 15th, I think. No, that's not the 15th. It's like the 16th. Yeah, the 16th of December, I should have my comparison between the Switch OLED and the Steam Deck OLED for Red Dead Redemption. And that's going to be an interesting one to take a look at for sure. So as long as I get that done this weekend, which there's not really any reason why it shouldn't happen unless something comes up, then that will be up next Monday. I'm hoping if I have time tomorrow, I might do some streaming of the Game Awards. I'm not expecting I will have the time because I do have to edit the podcast, and that may end up taking a bit more time, especially since I realized about halfway into recording tonight that despite pressing the button on my Stream Deck, it did not start the recording of the video side of things. So it's just going to be gameplay for that first hour, and that's going to be an interesting, different setup. I mean, I had one other episode where something like that happened, so it's not the end of the world, and it shouldn't be technically that bad, but either way, it's still kind of annoying. So it is what it is. But then I also have my YouTube cooking channel, Not Authentic But Delicious. That's YouTube at NABD Cooking. And there we just put out a recipe for beef broccoli pie, which is like a pot pie kind of thing. Savory pie. It's very, very good. Has ground beef, cream cheese, broccoli, as well as, other spices and that sort of thing. Homemade crust, and oh man, it's delicious. It's one of my favorites that my wife makes, and kids love it too. So it's great. It's up on the channel right now, and yeah. But that's it for that. Of course, we have the video version of the podcast on our YouTube channel at the Orange Box Podcast. The video version, of course, shows not only our beautiful faces, minus the first half of the episode this week, but also clips from games we've been playing. And typically, if we have video reveals for various games that have been shown off, trailers, that sort of thing, we'll include a lot of those, as well as we discuss the different topics. So you can check that out each week. Normally it goes up at 7 a.m. Central Time every Friday, barring issues with uploading, which lately I've been having those a lot more often because Premiere is being stupid. But then we have the audio-only version, which goes up on all major podcast platforms, ordinarily at 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday. And you can find that on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube Music, on Spotify, on Amazon Music, on Deezer, iHeartRadio, Pandora. I can't remember what all ones, but basically any major podcast platform, you should be able to find the Orange Box Podcast. So, of course, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can send us an email at the orangeboxpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet us on X/Twitter at the Orange Box Pod, or you can just comment on the video version, and we'll be sure to respond to you and or get back to you. If you have questions for us or comments that you'd like us to share on the podcast, you can feel free to leave those in any of those locations, and we'll be sure to read it on the show. We've had, I think, one comment so far on the podcast that it was really just the guy who had first told me about Pontiff and about pairing him, that was just responding to, my actual run and all of that. So, or I think, no, he was responding regarding Yorm. But anyway, that was the only thing. I didn't read it on the podcast, but I did respond to the comment. So, yeah, but even if you don't comment, even if you don't reach out to us, we're still going to talk for 2.5 hours every week because this is how we catch up from week to week, and it's just a good time. So that is everything, I believe. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast, and until next time, Half-Life 358 over 2 days was confirmed. Orange Box Podcast out.